From the time you wake up in the morning until about 6 or 7 or 8, sometimes 9 hours later, your brain is in a unique state. It is in a state of high levels of dopamine, a neuromodulator, and high levels of epinephrine, as well as hormones like cortisol and so forth. This phase 1 of our circadian cycle is when we are best at doing analytic, detail-type work. 0 to about 8 or 9 hours after waking, bright lights in your environment, in particular overhead lights, are going to facilitate focus. They're going to facilitate further release of things like dopamine and norepinephrine and healthy amounts of cortisol. And we want that to happen early in the day. You can use a ring light, or you can simply use any kind of other lights that you might happen to have, artificial lights. For those of you that can place your desk near a window, and even better to open the window, that would be really fantastic. Well, it turns out that sunlight is going to be the best stimulus for waking up your brain and body through this melanopsin to hypothalamus system. And by looking at sunlight through a window, it's 50 times less effective than if that window were to be open, mostly because those windows filter out a lot of the wavelengths of blue light that are essential for stimulating the eyes and this wake-up signal. Now, in the afternoon, starting at about 9 and continuing until about 16 hours after waking, you want to start dimming the lights in that environment. Now, in this second phase of the day, since most of us are working indoors, but even if you're working outdoors, you want to try and get the amount of light reduced overall, but in particular that overhead light. And you also want to start reducing the amount of blue light that you're being exposed to. Now that's light, but there's another aspect of vision that has been shown to be critically important for how alert we are going to be and how well we can maintain that alertness. And that has to do with where our visual focus is in a given environment. So I'm not talking about overall brightness. What I'm referring to now is simply where you place your phone or your tablet or computer screen or book, whatever it is that you happen to be looking at. There's a very underappreciated and yet incredible aspect of our neurology that has to do with the relationship between where we look and our level of alertness. The important thing to understand is when you are looking down below the level of your nose, you are essentially decelerating your alertness. You're reducing your amount of alertness. It might be subtle, but it's happening. Whereas when you look straight ahead, or in particular when you look up, you're increasing your level of alertness. If you want to be alert and you want to maintain the maximum amount of focus for whatever it is that you're reading or doing, you want that screen or whatever it is that you're looking at to least be at eye level and ideally slightly above it. There are a number of different ways that you could do this. You could wall mount a monitor. I think many people are working with laptops. It's a little bit harder to do that with a laptop. Some people, though, will configure a second screen. You have to decide what's right for you and your budget. It turns out that your posture, literally the position of your body relative to gravity, also has important implications for how alert you are. So ideally, you would be standing or seated. I would say the ideal would be standing. Second best would be seated. And your screen will be either directly in front of you or slightly above you. Now, with reference to posture, there are beautiful data illustrating that when we are standing up, those same neurons in our brainstem, locus ceruleus neurons, which release, I should mention, things like norepinephrine and epinephrine, those neurons become active when we are standing. Make sure that whatever you're looking at is directly in front of you and doesn't extend too far out to the side. Once you get out to, say, 6 or 12 or certainly 18 inches on either side of your eyes, you are dilating your gaze. By definition, you're dilating your gaze. It's completely subconscious, and it becomes very hard to maintain attention. So here's a principle extracted from the ophthalmology and neuroscience literature that you can adopt. For every 45 minutes in which you are focusing on something like a phone or a tablet or a book page or your computer, you want to get into magnocellular panoramic vision for at least 5 minutes. And the way that I suggest to do this is actually to take a walk, ideally outside. So for every 45 minutes or so, try and get 5 minutes of relaxing your eyes. What I'm about to tell you is a way in which you can use your physical environment to further shift your brain and nervous system into a mode that's either primed for analytic or abstract and creative thinking. The cathedral effect is a way in which our thinking becomes more restricted and restrained in tighter, smaller, more confined visual environments. Or if the ceiling is high or we are in expansive space with a lot of distance above us or space above us and out to the sides, maybe even out on a field, our thinking goes into these more broad, abstract, and kind of loftier future thinking. So what does this mean for workspace optimization? Well, most of us have a fixed ceiling level in our home, but you might have rooms in which the ceiling is higher and rooms in which the ceiling is lower. If that were the case, I recommend if you want to do creative work during phase 2, the 9 to 16 hours of your circadian cycle, 9 to 16 hours after waking, that is, that you do that in the high ceiling room, or maybe even outdoors, out on a deck or on a patio, because the highest ceiling, of course, is the sky. Whereas if you're going to do detailed analytic work, I would suggest doing that during phase 1 of the day. So is it better to sit or is it better to stand when doing work, at least as it relates to focus and productivity? And the answer is both. There have been a number of systematic studies exploring what are called sit-stand desks. So these are desks that can be set to a height that makes standing. It turns out that just sitting is terrible for us, okay? And there's an enormous number of studies out there that point to the fact that people who sit for 5 or 6 or 7 hours a day doing work have all sorts of issues related to sleep, neck pain, cognition suffers, there are a number of cardiovascular effects, even digestion. There may even actually be some almost pressure effects on the pelvic floor and things of that sort, depending on the chairs that one uses. But that people who stand are in a slightly better situation where many of those health metrics improve, but that people that do a combination of sitting and standing at the same desk throughout the day, or move from one desk to another if they don't have a combination sit-stand desk, that's going to be best, showed incredibly significant effects on reduced neck and shoulder pain, increase in subjective health, vitality in work-related environments, and perhaps most importantly, for sake of today's discussion, improvement in cognitive conditioning and the ability to embrace new tasks and cognitive performance. What this means is that we should probably spend about half of our work time standing and about half of it sitting, but not all sitting or not all standing. If you had to do all one or the other, standing is going to be better than sitting. What happens if we just stand? Well, that can also generate some postural issues.